I don't remember where I heard about this game, but HAAK is not talked about as much as it should be in the Metroidvania discourse, despite how great the game is. Even though it has an open world structure and meaningful non-linearity which give it a sense of scale usually found in more prominent games of the genre, it stands on very simple building blocks that, by the sheer talents of the devs, accumulate into one of the best Metroidvania experiences that came out in this decade. You play as HAAK, who is trying to find his brother Bach, and thus you show up in this Blade Runner looking world and engage in main and side quests. I would say that the game focuses a lot on the story. There's a lot of characters you come across and exchange dialogues with, but as per usual, I don't care much about stories in games of this particular genre, so I kind of glanced over them.
Don't try to understand it.
And luckily, the game summarizes the mission critical information neatly in your log, so you're not gonna get stuck if you don't read all the dialogues. Controlling HAAK feels swift from the get-go. It hits the sweet spot between a sense of total control over character movement and that slight floatiness that makes everything feel buttery and slidey, especially after you unlock infinite sliding ability. Luckily, you unlock most of the traversal abilities relatively early in the game, therefore get a chance to actually utilize them for the most of the game's duration, unlike some other modern games of this genre. Also, giving traversal abilities early on opens up the game in a big way, which in turn gives that sweet sense of overwhelming possibilities that a Metroidvania is supposed to provide, in my opinion. Speaking of unlocking things, the upgrade curve in this game is near perfect. The more you explore, the more you are rewarded with new abilities, ability enhancements, collectibles that you can exchange for further enhancements, or straight up money that you can buy enhancements with. There is a constant sense of forward momentum that is complemented by puzzles, traversal challenges, and enemy encounters that are just the right amount of difficult to demand your active engagement, but never to the point of frustration, until around the last 10-15% of the game.
Of course, jabronis.
Before I explain what happens at that point, I have to talk about the exploration side of the game, as that is the more important aspect of Metroidvania for me. HAAK's levels are mostly boxy, which goes well with the overall industrial Blade Runner-esque aesthetic the game's going for. The levels have just a handful of simple mechanisms that would be very familiar to everyone, like lasers, force fields, fans, moving platforms, spikes, acid, locked doors, and breakable bricks, but they don't feel repetitive due to how well thought out their placements are. The levels are brimmed with hidden pathways that at first feel very satisfying to discover, as most of them are optional, but you are always rewarded with something useful for discovering them. But then, very soon, it gets overbearing when you realize that discovering a lot of these hidden pathways are crucial to making progress. In fact, these are the primary ways to reach certain mission critical areas in a lot of cases. And because there are just too many of them, around the midpoint of the game you start feeling highly incentivized to obsessively keep hitting every wall hoping to uncover them. Needless to say, it becomes not fun very soon.
It's not exciting.
The aforementioned sense of fun exploration and constant forward momentum, aided by smooth controls and well-designed levels, come to a screeching halt around that last 10-15% of the game. Now, it simply could be a me problem, but around this point, even though I had explored way more than average, I still felt pretty stuck, with seemingly no way to progress further. So I stopped pursuing the main mission and focused on doing every optional thing, and only then was I able to get unstuck in progressing the main mission. What until this point felt like a non-linear type of game that allows players an unusual amount of freedom, especially in choosing to do or not do optional stuff, suddenly started feeling like a game that is forcing me to achieve 100% completion. This jarring halt in pacing severely damaged my experience with the game, especially since it was not a skill issue, not a tough combat scenario or platforming section that I myself couldn't pull off, not an ability that I hadn't unlocked yet, but rather the game kind of becoming directionless all of a sudden. Feeling stuck, I went on a loop of exploring each map, completing side quests, picking up enhancements of my abilities, and coming back to where I was stuck, only to rediscover that nothing is making a dent.
Why don't things just fucking work?
While I did eventually unstuck myself thanks to random Reddit posts, but let's just say the over-reliance on hidden pathways and making most of them absolutely essential for exploration progress was not a good level design idea in my opinion.
Lazy.
Again, the whole thing could simply be because I'm just dumb, but seeing so many people getting stuck at the same points I did makes me think the burden falls a little bit more on the developer side. But having said all that, exploration overall is very well done, and the sense of drawing up the map as you explore it feels very satisfying. Unlike traditional Metroidvanias, the whole game world is not joined together. Rather, they are divided in distinct areas that you unlock gradually in this world map. There is a hub area which you need to get back to again and again, and you pick up most of the side quests from this hub. There's a very open world-like feel to the quest design, which makes the scale and scope of the game feel larger than they actually are. What I liked about the idea of having separate areas is that you can freely move around the world map and stumble upon areas which would seem like you're not supposed to go to yet, but the game allows you to explore a substantial part of them, letting you pick up power-ups along the way, or unlock new abilities before the game would have intended, or even obtain a quest item before the quest is given to you. The sense of freedom of non-linearity you get from this design is very pleasing.
And I like it.
Unlike other parts of the game, combat becomes actually fun around the end of the game. For the longest time, combat remains pretty simple, which is tolerable because enemies are also simple and quite easy. It's obvious that combat is not the main focus here. There are some lockdown combat arenas which I guess the game throws at you as mini-bosses, but they're easy and short, and thank God, unlike certain developers, the devs of this game didn't think lockdown combats are peak game design, so there's only a handful of them. Besides these, there's only like 5 bosses, and the rest are just regular enemies who are easy to deal with and rarely pose any challenge. The boss fights are fun though. They are just the right amount of difficult, and you can spend these special coins to buy temporary benefits like giving yourself a shield or making the bosses weak. The simple combat does balance out the simple enemies, but I personally just hoped combat would be a bit more enjoyable. Whatever is there is just fine, I guess.
Thanks.
What I love the most is how the game allows you to discover certain gameplay aspects without explicitly telling you about it, which makes you feel smart for figuring them out on your own. For example, there are ledges which would feel just a touch out of reach when you try to jump and grab them, especially before unlocking the upward slash. I discovered on my own that jumping and then striking upwards gives me a little extra height, which I utilized to get to places I thought at first I wouldn't be able to go without something like a double jump. Later, I found this note where the devs actually talk about it. Likewise, your quest requires you to get a gate pass to enter an area. You can talk to this NPC and buy the pass with money, which I'd imagine most people would do, but if you're curious enough, you can also snoop around to gain entry to a semi-secret area near this NPC to get the same pass for free. These kinds of things, along with the somewhat non-linear way you can pick up new abilities, gives you that classic Metroidvania feeling of breaking sequence and doing things you're not supposed to do, which for me was very satisfying. There is a pretty long, unusually tough series of platforming sections after the final boss, which made me think there's going to be another boss encounter or some kind of big payoff to end the game. But after finishing this grueling platforming gauntlet, the game kind of abruptly ends with a cutscene, which I thought was kind of dumb. Sorry.
Apology rejected.
I got the good ending. I know there are multiple endings, so maybe there is a big payoff in the other endings, I don't know. But I assume this is the default ending that most people would get. And while I don't have any complaint about how the story ends, I barely cared about the story to be honest, but the way the ending was presented was, again, kind of dumb.
I've spoken as honestly as I can.
Do I recommend this game? Absolutely. If you're a fan of exploring and discovering things on your own, you'll love this game. The character feels great to control, puzzles make you feel smart, platforming is hard but not frustrating, combat, although simple, but is still enjoyable, and most importantly, the game gives you a sense of freedom that is hard to find in a lot of modern Metroidvanias. My overall impression of the game is very positive, and if there ever is a sequel, I'll definitely be playing it.